Well, as we've been reporting, Israel has launched a raid on Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa. It's issued a statement saying it's carrying out a precise and targeted operation against Hamas in a specified area in the Shifa hospital. It says the operation includes medical teams and Arabic speakers who have undergone specified training to prepare for this complex and sensitive environment with the intent that no harm is caused to the civilians. It repeats it's warned time and again that Hamas's military use of the Shifa hospital jeopardizes its protected status under international law and enabled ample time to stop this unlawful abuse of the hospital. Let's go back to Antony Loewenstein, independent journalist, author of The Palestine Laboratory, a book on Israel's arms and surveillance industry. He is staying with us. He's joining us live from Sydney. It's very good to have you with us, as we go through this extraordinary situation that's unfolding in Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa. I want to ask what you make of the timing of this ground operation at Shifa Hospital, just a few hours after the national security spokesman says that the US has their own intelligence, that Hamas uses Shifa and other hospitals to carry out their operations. And despite that, airstrikes on the hospital aren't okay. And hours later, we have a ground operation by Israeli soldiers into this hospital.
Look, Israel, I think, has been made pretty aware by the US that there's a time limit on their invasion of Gaza. I don't suggest that, therefore, the US is some moderating force. I mean that if it was up to Israel, and they've said that consistently for over a month, they could be inside Gaza for months, if not years. And that, of course, still might happen. But the ferocity of the current mission, I think, will not be sustainable from the US perspective, because if nothing else, Biden is thinking a lot about domestic considerations. It's not talked about very much, but that's the reality, that this is partly a US domestic concern for the US administration, because there's an election in 1 year's time. Biden, according to the polls, is looking likely to lose against Trump. Many people in the US who would have voted for Biden last time, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, are disgusted with the US position. So essentially, America, from what I understand, is telling Israel, you have a limited amount of time. Now, what that means, I don't know. 2, 3, 4 weeks is my understanding, the current ferocity of this. And you mentioned before the weapons, and that's such an important part of this, which doesn't get enough attention, that Israel's the one obviously doing the bombing and the attacking and the killing of civilians. But they can only do that if they have huge amounts of weapons from across the world. And since October 7, the US, UK, Netherlands, Germany, Australia have rushed huge amounts of weapons to Israel, which are certainly being used in its current war against the Palestinians in Gaza, which makes all those nations not just complicit rhetorically, but also potentially, if and when there's ever a war crimes investigation in The Hague, which I think many international forces are now pushing for.
And given the incredibly high civilian death toll, more than 11,000 Palestinians killed, more than 4,600 children killed over the past month, is it good enough for the US to say that they have evidence that Hamas uses this hospital to carry out operations, but they can't provide that evidence, that it's too... We were hearing from our correspondent in Washington, D.C., that one of the reasons they give for not providing this evidence is it's too granular?
I mean, any journalist or person who treats US official claims or Israeli claims at face value is a fool, because they don't know history. I mean, even in the last 20 years after 9/11, the US would go into hospitals in Fallujah in Iraq and cause complete chaos, claiming that they were full of terrorists. The US bombed a hospital, MSF hospital in Afghanistan, in Kunduz in 2015, killing huge amounts of Afghan civilians. And Israel has a long history of deliberately targeting medical facilities in the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza. So this is not new. The ferocity and the scale of it is fairly unprecedented in the last decades, and I'm not minimising that for a second. But there's a long history of Israel deliberately doing so. So the US has no real interest, frankly, or care, frankly, if Palestinian civilians are dying. They don't care. And I say that based on what's happened in the last month, the fact that even a few days ago, Biden was directly asked, will there be a ceasefire? His response was, no, none. Now, I've been hearing rumours, I know Al Jazeera has been reporting about this for the last day or so, that it's possible there'll be some kind of short pause or ceasefire for a few days and some hostage exchange. Guess we'll have to wait and see if that plays out. But none of that's going to solve the problem, because ultimately Israel claims its goal is to eradicate Hamas militarily. Whether that's even possible is another question. And the broader question, which I think many Arab nations need to think about, is a lot of Hamas leaders live across the Arab world. They don't live in Gaza. And I've been saying for a long time, and in fact some Israeli intelligence officers have been saying, that it's likely that there'll be a global assassination campaign by Israel to go after those Hamas leaders after this war might die down in the coming months and years. So a lot of instability coming in the coming period.
All right, that is author and independent journalist Antony Loewenstein joining us live from Sydney. Thank you very much for staying with us as we covered this developing story, all the latest developments from Gaza.